It's 5 minutes in, anyways.
Perfect.
5 minutes in, anyway, so we should probably get the ball rolling with this. So this will all be for Jeff, and then Harry and I will just discuss things that he'll steal from me for tomorrow.
Exactly.
All right, let me go and pull up the screen here. All right, so um, basically last week was insanely boring for crypto. Like we had some spikes up, we had some spikes down, but in the grand scheme of things, like just as you can see from the three charts here, we basically ranged. Like this was all last week, and we've just kind of been bouncing back and forth the last couple of weeks as far as Bitcoin dominance goes, USDT dominance, market cap in the alts. Like it's just money is just shuffling around, but nothing is really happening. Which is usually a sign, especially when you look at um, how long we've been accumulating on the on Bitcoin. Swap over to this. Like we've been accumulating. This is on the 4 hour, so we've kind of been at this range since mid March, and we've just been kind of bouncing back and forth. Usually, when we see stuff like this happen, eventually we have a ridiculous move, whether it's to the upside or the downside. There's arguments for either way, but it basically just boils down to at some point the trigger is going to be pulled, and we're all going to be wishing we had done something differently because that's the way it always seems to work itself out. Because I mean, like if you look back, what was it, December? It was very much the same way. We went. Granted, this one was a little bit later as far as range goes, but we also had no volume in December either. But basically, it carried on doing nothing for about the same amount of time. Like it started ranging from about the 16th of December. And then all of a sudden, we had that 40% move up. So who knows? And there's a lot of news coming out this month. Everything from new inflation data, which I'm not 100% confident if we're going to see the full impact of the recovery measures done by the government, the U.S. government last month to deal with the bank crisis. I don't know if we're going to see inflation hit that hard, but we have other stuff happening as well, which I'll be talking about. Basically, everything that's been getting done up to this point to combat inflation is getting tossed out the window. There's been a number of things that have shifted. So we can probably expect more rate hikes and more pain in the economies in the coming months. Food prices are going to go up, energy is going to go up, everything. And I'll get into that. But let's start just with the crypto market. So as I do each week, I always like to take a look at kind of where things have been playing out on the larger terms, and then I kind of scale my way down. So it's been something interesting on the weekly, and this would be the bullish argument. Is obviously, way back here. This is mid 2021. We had our double top up here, or if you follow the market maker method, we had a big SM, and we kind of went down for all of 2022. You could argue at this point that we've had a W, and we've actually had our first spike past the 50 EMA, which could indicate a long-term bullish move for Bitcoin. Now that doesn't mean we're suddenly hitting 100K tomorrow. This is something that could play. Like keep in mind, this candle here is from a year and a half ago. So to get back up here could be another year and a half or longer. But we have the possibility that we actually have hit the bottom, and that this is a sign that in the grand scheme of things, we are starting to see a long-term uptrend on Bitcoin. There's still a lot of potential volatility. We could still move all the way back down into the the 16 to 18K range and still have this entire setup be valid. If it did come all the way back down, that would negate this as being rise level 1, but it would still keep the actual formation plausible. I wouldn't put too much stock in this right now. It was just something to note so that, as the months go by, we just kind of watch how things play out. Where you really want to start getting bullish is if we wind up coming back down here at some point and we retest this 50 EMA, ideally at around the 50% mark of this vector candle. So right around 25K, which is a number we were talking about last week as a potential bullish rejection point. So if we happen to see that happen, that could actually indicate this is a valid move, and it would be putting us in a position for the rise 2 of the weekly, which, we'd be looking at least to the 32 to 34K, depending on the speed of it. And if it goes up beyond that, woo, next level above that is right here in the 50K range. That would be the next target. So again, months down the road, most likely, but just something to keep in mind. Going down to the daily, we obviously had a W formation back in December. We've had our one rise. And then this one was kind of an iffy rise. I don't really consider it one. It could be counted as, could potentially interpret it as one. I personally don't, just based on the way the structure worked itself out. This one I do consider definitely rise 2, and then we've been consolidating all this time, so we could be seeing at some point a retest back down again to around the 25K mark, which would then be the rise for the day 3. And if that the rise 3 of the daily chart, and if that rise of the daily chart coincides with the rise of the weekly, that's going to be a big push. That is going to be, as I said, the next target is 32 to 34K. So we can go down to 25K and then over the course of a couple days, suddenly be up another 30 to 40%. So that 25K level, I would mark it down on your trading view and just be prepared. I'm not saying buy at 25K. I'm not saying that we're definitely hitting 32 to 34, but that is a key point that if we see price get back down there, we need to see how the price action starts responding. And if it rejects off that, we could see a very big uplift. In regards to closer time frames, the 4-hour is a little squirrely, as always. It's really hard to tell what exactly is going on right now. It looks like, let's move that. It looks like we kind of had a M form over the weekend. This would have been the rise 3 end. We came down, we came up, we did a max damage M, and this could, in theory, be drop level 1.
Could I interrupt and ask a question, please?
Of course you can.
Yeah, sorry, I just missed that before. So you were talking about if we pull back to 25 and based on price action, then we could expect, or there's a really high possibility of a massive bounce from that. I missed part of the build up into that. So sorry to ask you to repeat. What was the reasoning behind that, please?
Well, we're on this. We finished the second daily rise of second rise of the daily candle. So if we hit the 25K, the next expectation is rise 3. Now, rise 3 doesn't have to go higher than the previous pricing. So if we go back to the daily, rise 3 could legit just come back down here and just retest our previous high. So we might just go right back into this 28 to 30K area, and that's the end of the move. It is possible. But where I was saying we might see a much bigger spike is because of the weekly. The weekly arguably could have had a W here, and we've potentially had a rise level 1 from a few weeks back. This would have been from mid-March when we had that massive spike just before the banking crisis. And or no, sorry, this was after the banking crisis. What, I can't remember. Fuck, I can't remember my dates. But in any case, mid-March, we had a big spike up. So if we were to retest right around the 25K mark, that would not only hit the 50 EMA, it would also hit the 50% fib line of this candle, which if it then bounced off of that would be a really bullish indication that we're going to have rise 2 on the weekly. And if rise 2 on the weekly and rise 3 of the daily coincide as far as their timing goes, that's going to be a massive move up. And I mean, as I said, 32 to 34K, if we're down at 25K, that's another 30 to 40% push. So that is significant.
And so then rise level 3 would be like we're talking really kind of bullish levels. All right, cool. Sorry, I just missed it before. I appreciate you repeating it.
No problem. And keep in mind that just because even if this does happen and that we hit level 2 at 32 to 34K, remember I still have that theorem that there are so many bulls right now looking at this 32K range as their indicator that the bull market is on. So like we know some leading crypto experts who say that sort of thing. So I mean, we could wind up reaching this, hitting off of 34, maybe 35K, a little higher, depending on where liquidations levels are at the time. Come down, Kobo off it, maybe do that, form an M, and then come way back down. Like you can tell by my magnificent art. Hopefully, you know where I'm going with this.
Yeah.
So the thing is that Rise 3 does not have to exceed previous pricing. It can match the levels of Rise 2 and just be a retest. So if we say get up to here, let me quickly delete this. If we come down here, we bounce off, we come up here, and I don't know where the 50 EMA will be, but like let's say it just says something like that. It comes back, it retests, say, off of 30K, and then we have rise level 3 again, and rise level 3 even goes just slightly higher, say it goes up to 35K or so. That could just ultimately be like whether it goes like that or we have rise 3 actually just get to 34 and then we just kind of dick around here for a long time. Either way, once we bounce off that 50 EMA on the third rise, people are going to be losing their shit on Twitter because they're going to assume like you're going to have had several bounces along the 30 EMA, and at that point that's a confirmation of a bull run as far as retail goes. And that could very much spell the end before we actually have the big dip down that everyone's been kind of expecting. Because this is
Well, that's what I'm thinking, because it's always about max pain, isn't it? And I think there's so many retail people who are still nervous and so much money that's on the side thinking, could just be a fake out, not sure. And that's why they keep doing those rises up until people say, oh my God, yeah. And particularly if it's drawn out, like you say, if then the EMA comes up to join at the same level, it's just like it's rejected it a few times, we're on. And that's when people pile in. And then, of course, that's when we're more likely to hit a nuke. At least if I was a market maker, that's the strategy I'd be playing if I was playing the really long game.
That's the thing. Volume levels are still low compared. Like they're better than what they were at the end of last year after FTX, but they're still lowish. We get into this area, and you're gonna have everyone and their dog dumping money into Bitcoin, and that will be the time to then just fuck everyone over. So it could happen. It may not. Like it could skyrocket. We could hit the, as I was saying, if the rise on the weekly goes to its next target, we're talking at least breaching 50K. So it is possible that this run actually happens. So you can't discount it. I'm just saying that this is a possibility of it being a significantly bad bull trap. And it's just been something that's been prolonged for a long time. And, maybe we just don't know what's going to happen. So I'm just trying to all we can do is once we hit this range, we just have to kind of see what price action is doing. If we want, typically, if we see DM and we see volume starting to decline and it just looks like it's losing its upward momentum, then basically it probably looked like a rising compression at that point. That would probably be a very good sign that we're going to wind up reaching and coming back down. But yeah, so that in any case, that's for the long term. We're talking this is to still be months off. So looking at the lower stuff, yeah, looking at the 4 hour, I do feel we're at the peak of like we've had our 3 rises. We may have an M here. This could be drop level 1. It's hard to say, especially since this morning we spiked up much higher. Now, if it gets over about 28.8, it's kind of releasing a lot of the longs that were trapped. So it could wind up negating this whole thing. We may wind up, depending on how things look, we could wind up, coming back, doing a third hit to the high before we go down. We could do another max damage thing. Like I'd have to look at liquidation levels to kind of take a few guesses at things. We also could just be retesting here and we could spike down and actually, do drop level 2. That is very possible as well. But right now, this is like a no trade area because because basically when you want to trade, once you've had drop 1, you want to trade the retest of the 50 EMA, and obviously that retest has failed. So now we just have to wait to see what price does at this moment in time. On the lower time frames, let me remove all this junk. All right. The 1 hour
27.5 has been a really, really strong support.
Yeah, we've been ranging for the last couple of weeks.
Yeah.
Right. So it's just been a range between 27.5-ish and 29K. And that's what I'm saying from a long-term perspective, this looks like a mass accumulation point. And when we see stuff like that happen, Bitcoin makes the news. That's when we start seeing things like we saw in January with a 40% move over a couple of weeks. And it could be up, it could be down, it could go in both directions. We could have like the worst double-ended stop hunt of all time. We just don't know what's being planned. But yeah, so the 1 hour, again, very, very sketchy. It looks like we had our 1, 2, 3 rises up here, possibly our M forming here, and this could have been our drop 1. Now this happened over the weekend, so that's why this is kind of iffy. That could have been drop 1. We came back up, pretty much retested here, and that could be drop level 2. But this right here negates this drop level 2. And we also didn't have a stopping volume candle. So it is very possible this wasn't even a drop. This could be the fake weekend move. So, I mean, like basically we had the M form and then we basically went down all of Sunday. And then this was the reversal of that fake move down. In which case, then really, as far as the market maker is concerned, this doesn't even really count. This was just to close out longs and induce shorts. And now they're actually back to doing their proper price action. So in which case we could wind up seeing we could see more upward momentum for a little while. The only thing we don't know is that sometimes there's 1, sometimes there's 2 fake moves. So this drop down could have been the first fake move, and we could just trend up all day today. And then at Tuesday, which is the start of the actual trading week for the market maker, that's when we actually start our downward momentum. As it stands right now, we're still trending. So the way I would look at trading this, I'd have to look at liquidation levels, where the order blocks are, and look for rejection points. Because right now I would not want to trade this because there's no way to know which way the market's going. Like we're failing another 50 EMA retest right now. So yeah, basically this is a best to stay out of the market kind of scenario. And instead, if we look at say high block and we kind of look at the we'll look at like the last 7 days of data. What am I doing? Just to kind of get a picture for what they're trying to do in this accumulation level. So yeah, they don't really have a lot to do right now. So at some point, the way it's looking, the market maker is going to have to make a strong move. Everyone's getting tired. And you just look like moving up to the 27, 28 range. There's some stuff there, but there actually isn't a ton of liquidity. So, I mean, they could wind up trying to repush 29K, seeing if they can take a chomp at this. They could wind up moving down. But these would be the two levels I'm looking at. I would be looking at them either trying to go for the 29.5 area. So let's mark this down. Or we could look at the 27.3 area. And once it hits one of those two spots, we'd be looking at whether or not price bounces off of there. If we look at Trading Light, let's see if that kind of gives us any idea of what's going on. Eventually, here we go. All right, so that's ETH. Switch over to Bitcoin. All right, so order block wise, there's nothing around the 27.3 area, so it doesn't look like they're targeting it right now. 27.9 to 28K is kind of what they're playing with, which would be this right here. It would actually be a recovery of this green candle. So we could actually see a spike down to at least 27.9 at some point just to set off, which we're kind of seeing right now, actually. This isn't really strong. The volume is really weak at the moment. Upwards, we're looking at like I mean, we see some volume at around 28.5 to 28.6, but nothing really substantial. It literally looks like right now they're just accumulating. They're not really, all they've done is kind of set a floor here. So at some point they might just move price down just to recover that imbalance they caused with the push up today. But it seriously just looks like they're just sticking around. They're letting retail move the price however retail wants to move the price. Which again is a no trade sign. I would want to see a much more significant presence. Like this is definitely a good floor sign. But these, if price moves down, they could easily pull these orders. So I wouldn't want to be trading expecting a long at this point because it doesn't match up with an EMA. Or I guess it does. It matches kind of with the 200 depending on how far it hits down. That would be this line right here. But yeah, it's just messy. It's just really, really messy. Okay, so before I progress to talking about other things, does anyone have any questions about what I'm saying here? Or any thoughts of their own in regards to the markets? No? Okay.
Not me, no, no.
Okay, so let's migrate into more things to keep in mind. Uh, my dates to remember have been updated a little bit. Now, one thing I was mentioning before is that I'm expecting US inflation to go up over the next couple months. I don't know if this month will see a big change to the numbers just because the inflation numbers are a bit lagging and we didn't have the bank stimulus happen until the last week of March, like 1.5 weeks left. And I don't know if the April numbers will accurately reflect how much that stimulus has affected things. But April 12th is the CPI and core CPI dates. So those will be the first inflation numbers that we see. Coincidentally, that also is still the date the Shanghai update for ETH releases. So there could be a sign of a planned market movement at that time using all three of those updates as a potential reason for the market move. Doesn't matter which way it goes, just got to keep it in mind. But if inflation does go up, obviously the Dixie's going to go up, the markets are going to go down. The Dixie that I've been looking at, I usually look at it on the 4 hour. And to me, I don't know about you guys, but I am seeing this, which is making me wonder if there's expectations of another push up towards the 800 EMA here on the 4 hour, which would get us back up to about 104. Now, that might not be today or tomorrow. This is something that could still play out over a week or two, which coincidentally, a week from now would be, well, just over a week would be the CPI update. So just to keep something in mind, we may actually see a spike in the dollar. Plus, you have to factor there is a ridiculous amount of bearish news about the US dollar going on right now. And
I thought exactly the same thing, double bottom, and you were absolutely hammered with this cyclical news about the dollar being removed as the world's global reserve and about the yuan, blah blah blah. And the more I hear that, I just think every time I hear news pushing something in one direction, then the markets do the opposite. So I thought exactly the same thing.
Yeah, so it's just one thing to be considered to consider. At the end of the day, there's a lot of things going on just at a macroeconomic level. So there still may be problems for the US dollar. This could be a situation where the smoke actually is showing there's a fire. But at the same time, and I'm actually going to play devil's advocate a little bit about this later on too, because I've been trying to have some thoughts about this. But as I said last week, typically when things happen, they tend to happen unexpectedly to us. No one saw the issues with Signature Bank and Silicon Valley happening until they just happened. You know what I mean? Like it just happened overnight. And typically when you see news from governments doing things or governments being in talks or speculating or investigating stuff, it all tends to be noise. So the fact that general market sentiment in traditional finance is very bearish right now, I'm actually expecting to see an uptick. And if the inflation numbers do come through the way I'm kind of expecting them, then yeah, we could see a push to 104, if not higher. But in any case, that's just something we need to watch out over the next week for. I would really watch how the Dixie kind of lines itself up. I have not looked at the NAS or the SPX so far this week. What are we looking at here? Okay, so obviously we had our drop. So, I mean, that's a very extended move. Like all of this. I can't really see market structure at the 4 hour level. What if we look at the 1 hour? Oh, they always do that. Yeah, unfortunately it's way too messy for me to really be able to but like I could guess at some of this stuff that, hey, we might have a proper rise here, a retest, another rise here, but it's all speculative at this point. All I'm seeing at this moment is that since again mid-March, we've basically had nothing but a massive rally going on. But another reason we need to be worried about inflation is the news that broke over the last day or so, which is the fact that OPEC is cutting back supply of oil for the rest of this year by approximately 1.5 million barrels a day, which I believe my math puts out at about 4%. And regardless of anything else, you may think about reflation or anything else that's going on in various countries. The price of oil has very much been one of the leading factors in the inflation that we've been experiencing, at least at a base level, on top of everything else. And when we look at oil today, that news kind of made a little dent in the oil market. We gapped up approximately, I think it was about 4 or 5%. We gapped up 5.5% at market open, and the U.S. markets haven't even opened yet. So we have no idea how the U.S. market is going to respond to this happening. Um, so that's going to be interesting. But with the fact that supply is being cut, that is going to push oil prices up. And if oil prices go up, that means inflation is going to go up worldwide. If inflation goes up, then you're going to wind up having more pressure about interest rate increases and things like that, which is good for the Dixie, obviously. It's going to suck for us from a purchasing power standpoint, and it's going to be bad for the markets. So the thing is that the markets may have a base reaction right now. Where we're really going to see where things get hit is because remember, there's a narrative right now since CFOMC from the last couple of weeks is that we're kind of hitting um that tipping point where we're not really we're going to raise interest rates like 25 more basis points right now, and then that's going to be the last one that gets done. That's the narrative the central banks and what I've been seeing a lot of financial people saying. That's general markets, stock market, or like Wall Street sentiment right now. So give it a month or two, and if inflation suddenly starts creeping up again and they actually have to start raising interest rates a lot harder, then that market sentiment's going to change and that could spike a panic in the market. So I don't know what to say how things are going to come. I can't predict it, but the fact that there's an intended reduction of supply to at least the end of this year is that's gonna hurt us. So just to keep that in mind. Uh, any comments about that? Any thoughts before I keep continuing?
Only one about production. I know the Russians said they're going to cut production, but the Russians constantly say they're going to cut production, and they never, ever, ever do, because they basically can't. Because if they do, they'll end up going offline because most of their oil's in permafrost. But obviously, that
Well,
that has no effect on it. Like the Arabs can do that as and when they want, but I think the Russians last time they went offline was collapse of the Soviet Union, just because of the whole mechanism of like the totalitarian state that controlled everything crashed. They went offline. It took them about 30 years to get some of their pumps back online. So the Russians won't, but Saudi can do it as and when they want, and they're obviously the big players.
yeah, Saudi has said that they're going to do it. I want to say India has committed to it as well, and a few others. I did see the article yesterday, and I actually did have the countries listed. that were talking about it. But yeah,
Iran
so
didn't say they would, did they? And I think Iran signed a deal with a peace deal with Saudi, but that doesn't mean they're friends in any way. It just means they're not going to try and undermine each other directly for a while. But I just think any gap in the market, I would expect the Iranians to try and take advantage of it. But again, that is just speculation.
the Iranians, yeah, that's on my list of stuff. I don't think they're a player yet in this, but I think they're going to be.
How do you mean they're not a player in it? What, like joining in
But
the cutting?
yeah, so like I mean like Iraq is reducing it, UAE is reducing it, Kuwait's
Qatar, I
going to
think.
reduce it. Now these are all small players, like these are all just like Iraq is, probably the largest one besides Saudi Arabia. I think Saudi
What
Arabia
about Kuwait?
Kuwait is 128,000. Oman's cutting it, Algeria's cutting it, Kazakhstan's cutting it. Russia says they're going to cut it, but as you said, whether or not they actually do is a whole other story. Saudi Arabia said they're going to do 500,000. So yeah, it's basically it's more that like it's not just Russia. Russia accounts for about a third of what's estimated to be cut. But
Yeah.
even if they don't cut their stuff, if all the other countries do, you're still talking over 1 million barrels a day, which
But
is
also the cut is not it's not across the board. I mean, so they cut it, but in terms of who suffers from that, that's not going to be even. So with a lot of them, with the likes of a lot of the Arab states aligning more with China, if they're cutting, you'd imagine what remains they'd give more to favorable partners, let's say, and less to Europe.
well, yeah, but you don't know what their intentions are, right? So it could be they reduce supply and they just give it to their preferred partners, like they get priority, or it goes to the highest bidder. But
Yeah.
either way, if you are not in either of those companies, the cost of oil for you is going to be significantly higher, or you're going to have less supply and higher demand. Either way, it pushes inflation. And even if, say, um, the EU and UK are completely taken care of, and even say China is taken care of and stuff, let's say the US is not part of that, or even if they are, we import stuff. Like there's still a lot of international trade that's going to be affected by this. So even if, say, the price of oil in the US doesn't get affected by this because the US, magically is able to maintain their level of supply with whatever's left. That doesn't mean that, South America is getting their oil supplies that they need, in which case all the imports of like fruits and stuff and minerals that they bring from South America to the US is going to wind up being more expensive because the cost of transport is going to go up and harvesting and all that sort of stuff, which is then going to turn around and increase inflation still in the US. So it's going to increase oil prices. That's just basically how it's going to play itself out. And it might affect different countries differently, but it's going to affect us all at some level. That's basically my expectation here. Now, one thing I did want to mention, this is kind of an aside, I wanted to talk a little bit about um, dealing with market sentiment and dealing with FUD. I just wanted to cite a few examples of stuff that's happened over the last, week or so, just to kind of hint that we have to be really careful about what we see online because things are getting really crazy right now in terms of the level of by the set that like everything is just so confusing at this point. You can't make sense of what happens in the markets. And the first thing I wanted to show you was this that got shown on our Discord. Bijan posted this from a very reputable guy. Duo9 is actually a very respectable person in the industry. And he retweeted a post from one of the news aggregates that never post sources in regards to the crypto industry, saying that crypto.com is under investigation by U.S. agencies. And he reposted it saying, like, he obviously just saw this and retweeted it. People do that. But I tried to research this, and I don't know, maybe you guys will have better success, but I could not find anything anywhere that indicated that this was true. Like, I couldn't find a speculative article about it. I couldn't even find another article, like an opinion piece, that said that this was that agreed with this. Um, so it's always important that when you see a headline like this, the first thing you do before you take it seriously, you need to research it. Especially when it's in relation to crypto in general, because even if it's coming from a reputable source, you can't always know that they actually did any effort. He's just basically regurgitating what this guy said. And if you were a person that used crypto.com, you could be freaking out right now and panicking, exiting trades prematurely, all that sort of stuff. So that's something to keep in mind. Another example of
Whale
how,
chart is perma FUD as well. Sorry to interrupt you again. He's literally everything he ever posts ever is just massive FUD. It's almost like he's single-handedly trying to tank the market. But I see a lot of people that follow him always quote that he's a guy called Randy who used to be like a total shiller and pump and dump guy and just a massive scammer. So I don't know what his game is or what the game overall is, but unless I'm sure it's whale chart where it's just non-stop FUD all the time, and the vast majority of it, if you look in the if you go on his posts and you look in the comments, the vast majority of people are just like, oh, once again, no sources, and everything is like, yeah, it's like it'll be like Biden said that he is going to introduce the death penalty for people that buy Bitcoin, and that's it. And you know what I mean? It's so, some of it's more believable, and some of it's so outlandish, and it's rarely got any sources at all.
right. So I mean, it could be anything from the fact he's got some shorts in and he's trying to manipulate the market, or he just spouts off random shit because he just wants the views. Like, there's no way to know. Um, but my point, just in general, was you need to watch out for this sort of stuff. You can't take headlines at face value. The other example I wanted to show, I noticed today on Twitter, long COVID was trending in Canada. And whether or not you believe in COVID and vaccines, that's irrelevant. I wanted to show just how crazy market confusion can be. So this is my live feed about COVID, and you'll see, you have one person saying long COVID is a big issue. This is a lot of these are opinion people, but then you'll also see things talking about, issues about long COVID that science is talking about. But then you'll get to other areas. Uh, Unfortunately, my feed keeps moving on me. Like, saying Canada, it's going to be a potential issue. People bitching about the NHS, but then there's other people saying, oh, well, look, there's documentation saying it's actually more about the vaccines. I saw other ones talking about how there were reports that about a third of the people who were saying they had long COVID actually had never had COVID, and that it was more linked to anxiety and depression that's just being lumped in, or people are self-diagnosing themselves with it. Um, so the point is that you could read this entire feed. um like, here it says there's a study, like, obviously, even if you read through all this, but there's a study that says that corona gets stuck in your brain, which is turning things into a neurological disease. um and then there's other people saying that the vaccines didn't help with COVID protection at all. Like, it just goes on, and it doesn't matter where you are in regards to uh this whole pandemic situation, or how you think about it from a political level. It is just the fact that even just slightly scrolling through this feed, you get so many differing opinions, supposedly all from credible sources, all with various conflicting information. And this is a prime example of just how, in any industry, whether you're talking TradFi, health, cryptocurrency, everything has to be taken with a grain of salt. And at the end of the day, we need to start moving away from what social media is talking about, just in general, because it seems nowadays it is just built to confuse the fuck out of us. Because you'll see, you're either going to be looking for, um, confluence to your own thoughts and you'll dismiss the stuff that goes against it, or you're just going to be swept up into a narrative that may or may not have any actual factual basis. So, what I would really recommend when we're talking coming from a cryptocurrency standpoint, and I say this about myself too, I've been mentioning a couple of weeks. I got swept up with being a super bear in crypto with how everything was being said, and I missed so many opportunities because of it. We have to get to a point where we stop caring about market sentiment as far as following what they're saying and taking anything that gets said as something that we should be considering versus looking at the price action and recognizing that big money is going to move the markets how big money wants to move the market. So we're better off kind of watching how big money does things and not caring what the average person says. And it's the only way we can do things. And if we do that, we will it'll be a lot less stressful, and B, it will be easier to be able to predict how the market's going to move. So that's just something to keep in mind. Um, let's see other things that I had. I got more information about the Binance lawsuit. Unfortunately, I don't have the article for it. I tried to find it this morning and I just could not find it in my history. So the source right now is Trust Me, Bro. I swear I saw it. I'm sure one of you will be able to find it somewhere online. And if you can, I'd appreciate you linking it back to me. It looks like the bulk of the accusations that the CFTC threw against Binance US uh, is not talking about stuff that's happening now. It's investigations on transactions that were occurring between 2018 and 2020. Um, so basically, what they're accusing them of is that several years ago, like during the crypto winter time, we had that they were allowing U.S. people to trade derivatives, as well as people who arguably should be sanctioned and not being allowed to do any kind of financial transactions. Um, for the most part, it doesn't look like there's any real allegations of fraud. There is the talk of that there were corporate accounts. Like there's an accusation I think of market manipulation from corporate accounts doing stuff. CZ has come back and refuted that, basically saying that we do have corporate accounts that occasionally, um, you know, sell in the market, but that's just, how we do business, just in terms of, sometimes we have tokens that we have to cash out for whatever reason. It, as I said, I wish I had the information in front of me. Unfortunately, I don't because he says it more succinctly. But it's just basically like if they're removing all their assets because they've closed down a coin, or if they're liquidating BTC for whatever reason. That's just, you know, the corporation still has to move stuff around. And it does make sense to me that if they were going to market manipulate, why would they manipulate with spot? Because that actually requires them spending cash. If I was ever going to see a true Binance conspiracy theory in regards to market manipulation, for me it would be more about futures, because that's just data. And we have seen over the years a few times where weird pricing happens in the markets. Like how many stories have we heard over years where people would be in um in really long spot positions, or like they'd be in spot positions with a really low stop loss on it, or they'd be in the futures market with a long that's been working really well, and then you would see the market suddenly Bitcoin on Binance would drop to like $3,000. It would just be like a massive spike down and just liquidate everyone who was in a position at that time, and then it would immediately spike right back up. And they'd call it a technical error or whatever, but they'd never actually resolve anything. Those kinds of things I would see as more of a potential market manipulation. But when you're dealing with a company that deals with more than just trading assets, um, it does make sense that they would need to occasionally liquidate stuff and use their corporate accounts to do so. I don't know enough about it to make a big stink about it, but basically what I'm saying is that from the responses I've seen and from what the lawsuit actually seems to be about, it doesn't seem like there's anything substantial that we need to worry about nowadays. Most of the lawsuit is in regards to what Binance did in the past, and it wasn't even necessarily fraud. It was just the U.S. regulatory agencies do not appreciate their U.S. citizens doing any kind of trading outside of their regulatory body. That's really all it boils down to. It doesn't mean anything wrong was done in terms of how the average person was treated. Just the fact the government's mad that they didn't have their hand in the cookie jar. So I would keep an eye on it, but I'm not very bearish against Binance right now. But obviously, we'll have to see how things play out over the next little while. Let's
Ask a
see.
question about that.
Sure.
So I think it was probably late 21, and everyone, I think most people know about it, where there was that massive spike down. So I was just thinking about what you said, where a whale a whale supposedly dragged a load of Bitcoin onto Binance and hit sell at market, and it just ate through the order book, and a few people were delighted that they got $8,000 Bitcoins. Could that have been? I mean, does that make sense? Would that not be worth their while? That's obviously got to be a fuck up rather than manipulation, right? In order to dump the market, in order to, because I just wonder, selling that amount of Bitcoin, would they be able to collect more than that in the amount of contracts and people they liquidate? They just wouldn't need to take it that far.
Uh, I mean, it could be a mistake. It may not. It's hard to say because when you're talking big numbers like that, from our logical standpoint, we would never expect a person to want to do that. Like if they've got $20 million or $50 million worth of Bitcoin, I was going to say I'm willing to sell it all. I don't care about the slippage and hope for the best. You know what I mean? Like most people with that much money
Exactly. It just seems
would.
too stupid to have that much money and to have that many of them to do something so reckless. Just seems kind of unlikely. But then I
Well,
don't
yeah,
know. I don't understand the mechanisms behind moving the price that much, because how far do you need to take it before you liquidate everyone? You certainly don't need to take it from 48 down to 8, even at 1 to 1. If you take it half the way, that no, yeah, you
yeah.
actually no,
So
hold on. Yeah, no one's going to be at 1 to 1 leverage, are they? But even if like people at 2 1, you need to take it 24,000 to liquidate everyone. So taking it down to 8,000 just doesn't make sense as a tactic, so to speak. But
well, and I mean the thing is that I don't know how deep the order books go. Like I don't know how much Bitcoin would need to be sold to push price down to that level, and it'd have to be sold fast enough that all the bots out there don't have time to react. Like it would have to be like a single sale. You could, but I mean, if you're selling that much or buying that much Bitcoin, no one does it on the open market. Like there's not a single there's no one who's trying to buy or sell like 500,000 of Bitcoin doing that. It's all done OTC to ensure that they
yeah, that's
have
what
a
I was thinking.
predictable price. Um, the only exception to that I could see would be a panic sell or a hack. And not necessarily a hack on Binance, but like say if Bitcoin was managed to be stolen by someone who isn't very financially literate, but
And they
they
just
still
want to
want
dump it
to do that.
quickly. They might even be willing to take the slippage, but just dump it quickly and get the money into Monero or whatever, where they can just kind of cover their trail and just get whatever and then and disappear, so to speak.
Precisely, but that's assuming it was a legitimate sale. There's always the possibility that it was a technical error, like something like the entire sell order book just disappeared for a minute, or the buy order book, like something happened on on the tech side where someone was like, "Oh, I want to sell half a Bitcoin," and then all of a sudden it figured, well, there was no one willing to buy Bitcoin until you got down to the $8,000 level. And so,
Yeah.
well, you're selling it up market. Well, a person's willing to buy it at 8,000, so there they go. And that, so like, I have to admit, I'd have to look back at that spike and see what the volume was during the time of that spike. But my guess is that it was a technical issue and not some whale making a big mistake. Because I mean, even if you just don't care about slippage, there's there's so much volume that happens in the market that unless you're selling like hundreds of millions of dollars worth of Bitcoin, especially when you're talking during like a bull run, to be able to sell that much to get priced that low.
On a retail exchange doesn't make sense. Well, there was another that led on to another question actually. You were talking about the amount, so it's like moving the market with perps rather than spot. But I've heard a lot of talk, and again, it's just talk. People talking about the recent move in the market about it being Binance, and you say, why would they print that much? But I don't know the mechanism between BUSD and USDT and how connected they are and whatever. But I've heard a lot of people suggesting that Binance just printed BUSD. Now, I do remember he said everything's backed, but if it's backed with Tether, which can be printed out of nothing, so I don't know. CZ's relationship
Well,
with Tether, etc. But it'd be very easy for them to create that and pump the market because it's been done so many times.
I have to admit this is kind of outside my area of expertise, but just based on my understanding of it, Binance doesn't have the ability to print BUSD. That's Paxos, right? So it's a third party company that controls the supply of BUSD. And on top of that, Paxos has stopped creating new BUSD since they announced it in what, January, that they were phasing things out?
February.
January, February, thank you. So basically I don't know any information about this. Like perhaps they did create another batch of BUSD and transferred it to Binance. If they did, it should be visible on the BUSD blockchains. But from a logistical standpoint, I couldn't see um, CZ being able to do that on his own without
Are
it
they
being
connected to Tether at all?
uh like Paxos.
No, no, Binance or CZ.
I would assume so. Like even if there's no direct ties, they have to have some sort of connection either with Tether or
It's
Bitfinex.
Bitfinex that owns Tether.
Of
Yes,
course it is.
but
Of course it is. That's right. They're basically the Fed of crypto, aren't they? Just print more money when you feel like it.
like Bitfinex does own USDT or like
Yeah,
they're
yeah.
connected with USDT, but when you're talking an exchange that has 70 or 80% of the market share, there is a very good chance that they've got their hands somewhere in that whole area as well. Because why wouldn't they want to have a piece of that vertical?
Yeah, sure.
Um, but I mean, that's all speculative. I don't know for certain. Uh,
Cool. Sorry, I
okay,
took it all off at a tangent then, but it's kind of something I
no,
wanted to ask. So,
that's the whole point of this conversation, or like of the roundtable, right? Is
cool.
just having discussion. So a few other things I want to discuss. Bitcoin adoption is getting stronger. I don't know what it's going to look like, but Russia is said to be passing crypto legislation this month. Good or bad, I don't know what it's going to look like. The article didn't say anything about it. However, they are also in the process of building or repurposing uh, to get a new Bitcoin mine running in the summer. So my guess would be whatever legislation they come up with, it is going to not be banning crypto to at least some degree. Like I don't know what it'll look like, but obviously they're going to be moving forward, and this legislation is going to be how Russia then handles crypto moving forward. So we need to keep an eye on that because since Russia seems to be leading the way with everything that's going on with BRICS, it is possible that the other countries that are involved with BRICS will adopt similar legislation. We'll just have to keep an eye on that. NASDAQ is expecting to have crypto custody services for Bitcoin and Ethereum by the end of this quarter. So that doesn't necessarily mean that, general institutions are going to be buying it, but if NASDAQ is now planning on having those kinds of services, there's a good chance the US is not going to be banning crypto outright. So there's that to keep in mind as well. Then, of course, we've been hearing how the Hong Kong banks are starting to, including banks with Chinese ties, are starting to offer on and offboarding services for crypto firms. So Asia is really moving forward with crypto adoption, and that's where we may wind up seeing um, a lot of the money starting to flow over in that direction and from that direction. All right, let's see what else we got here. Then there was then I was talking about the US dollar. It's hard to say, and I'm kind of moving into um speculative areas here, because I'm trying to think of logical reasons why certain things are happening the way that they are. Um, there might not be a logical reason behind it, but I'm just trying to get some thoughts out here. So right now, from what I was able to find, India, Russia, China, Saudi Arabia, Brazil, South Africa, Pakistan, France, and as we mentioned before, most likely Iran, are all starting to do oil trading outside of the US dollar. That doesn't mean that they're not trading at all in US dollar, but they're now starting to move to either using the ruble or yeah, ruby. I can't remember the Russian currency, um, or their own currency to to facilitate oil transactions. So the U.S. dollar may start moving away from being like the U.S. standard for oil just may stop being a thing. It's I don't know, um, but it
Do you think
looks.
some? Do you think some of it could be really symbolic? It's like making a statement. I think I posted this before in the WhatsApp, but the Kenyan Prime Minister was boasting about the fact he's going to be buying in Kenyan shillings. Can you really imagine Russia saying, right, yeah, we'll just stick these Kenyan shillings in a bank and hold on to them because they're definitely going to hold their value? Do you know what I mean? It's like it seems like it's just really gesturing. It doesn't actually mean much. Like what they're going to do, just hold it there. They're more likely going to buy US treasuries or at least some assets. So just because you buy some currency to do a deal and then get rid of it after doesn't really give it legitimacy. It's just making a statement and posturing, possibly.
Yeah, especially when you talk about a country like France being willing to do this. Um, it like it just doesn't make a lot of sense to me that it's just everyone saying fuck the US. I know that's kind of what it seems on the surface, but I don't think it's that. I honestly feel that and this is where I'm going into my speculative thoughts. I'm actually wondering if the US is actively not giving a fuck about constantly being the oil or the standard for US for oil prices anymore, because they've made zero stink about this stuff. Like I have not seen anything from the on the administrative side that would indicate anything about them being upset about this or them
But they're
uh
closing themselves off from the world more and more anyway, aren't they? They're having a more and more hands-off approach, and they've become more and more oil self-sufficient with the shale revolution. So
and
maybe they're giving less of a shit.
there's also other thoughts involved too. Oil is in the process, if the WEF has their way, oil is in the process of being phased out, or like mass oil consumption is in the process of being phased out. It's not going to be gone completely because not every country is going to be able to adopt the stuff, but they're already talking, by trying to move most people over to electric vehicles, trying to move away from natural gas. Um, Power production, we have had massive breakthroughs over the last few years in nuclear fusion and nuclear fission technologies. Obviously, those take time to build out, but basically, oil has a shelf life at this point.
But
in
why has
terms
the
of
EU and so many nations been actually trying to cut down on nuclear power? I mean, that's why they feared Russia when they invaded. And I think Russia realized that they were much more dependent because they've been shutting down all the nuclear power stations. And they're like, great, now we can invade. And then they can't do anything because they need our gas.
it's because nuclear is scary to people,
Yeah.
not necessarily the
One of
governments.
it's the cleanest, efficient energy that's available.
And there's even cleaner ones that are happening.
Just
One
don't
of the
build it
big
on a fault
things,
line or in a tsunami in the direct route of a tsunami, or let communists run it. And if you do that, you're probably going to be fine.
but I mean, at the end of the day, I mean, nuclear technology has evolved significantly. The biggest problem that we have right now is most nuclear plants are stupid old. Like I know at least in Canada and likely the US as well, we haven't updated our technology in the last like 30 or 40 years. Like it's all been refitted and stuff like that, but we haven't actually had new facilities built that harness, you know, tech that's existed since the dawn of the internet. So um, there's always going to be safety concerns there, but no one wants a nuclear plant by where they live because there's always fear of there being, everyone's afraid they're going to, suddenly become a mutant or have a nuclear explosion, things of that nature. But um, there's a big push with the WEF to move away from fossil fuels. And whether or not they actually manage to do it, I don't know. But if they start phasing out the ability to use combustion engines in countries like the US and the UK and Canada, and probably a lot of other countries trying to follow this narrative, um, oil requirements are going to drop significantly. It's still going to be necessary for things likely like ships, and a lot of poorer countries will likely still use it. But oil needs are going to drop. On top of that, um, they have discovered, well, not discovered, helium 3 is something that's been talked about a few times. But there's a lot of speculation that our next big phase of power production is going to be helium 3, and that's going to be from mining from the moon. Um, Helium 3 produces a ridiculous amount of power, clean power. Well, clean is about as clean as you can get, to a point where the expectation is that the helium 3 that they're estimating is about a few meters below the moon's surface, if they mined it all, could power our current world's needs for about 1,200 years. Now, that doesn't necessarily mean they're just going to be able to mine it all tomorrow. Um, we may not even be mining it, within the next few years. That might very well be the next phase of things, because power production is one of the key ways for countries to be able to assert dominance over other countries. So oil is going away. The U.S. may not like um, oil right now
Is
because
this like really well-known information? Can I just do a Google search or have a look on YouTube and find out all
do a
about
Google
helium
search
three?
on Google search on helium 3. There's tons of information about it.
Cool, brilliant. Thanks for that.
Um, the problem is we don't have a lot of it on Earth, so it's not something like it exists, but we don't have a ridiculous amount of it. But the moon is absolutely full of it. So there is the possibility, especially when you factor in that in the last few years we've had a lot of commercial um, space development going on. We have the possibility of that becoming a new massive power source because it's profitable as well. Like the first companies that are capable of actually doing helium 3 extraction on the moon and bringing it back in a proper fashion, you're talking billions, if not trillions, of dollars of potential profit. So, and it requires very little. I think it's something like 1 ton of helium 3 can can power the U.S. for a year. I think is kind of what it's worked out, and I don't know how much effort it would take to extract or bring back that much of the material, but rest assured there are likely more smarter minds than me trying to figure that out. But even if you take that aside, there are a lot of nuclear fusion um, tech over the last few years that has been drastically evolving. So in the next 10, 15 years, oil and natural gas may not even be something most countries care about. Like, I know there's a lot of countries that don't like using the US standard for oil pricing. The US might not appreciate being reliant on so many other countries for their oil supply. Or rather, not their oil supply, their oil refining. I think because that's the biggest issue the U.S. has is their refinement capabilities. But still, it boils down to if the WEF has their way, we're going to be moving away from oil dependence. And we have the power technology that in the next 10, 15 years, we might not need it. And honestly, I think in the grand scheme of things, if we actually come up with some decent long term power production things for electricity, that is actually really good for the world. I just don't know if it's going to happen in my lifetime. So we'll just have to see how that goes. Um, Now we've only got about maybe another 5 or 10 minutes
I
left.
was just about to say you got about 5, 10 minutes before I gotta go.
Yep. So, so I've been kind of just spitting through all of this really quickly because I wanted to make sure I got everything out there I wanted to talk about. But I am open to anything you guys have to say about anything I've already discussed today, or if you have thoughts um, in regards to anything new.
Just to say, I just looked up what you said about helium-3. Just by comparison, the density or where it's available, it's like 7,000 times more available on the surface of the moon than Earth. So that's just backing up what you were saying.
Yeah, that's exactly it. And uh, it's one of those things that there are likely a lot of governments trying to figure out the best way to extract it because no one has claiming rights on the moon right now. So um, it's basically one of those things that the first to get there is going to be so ahead of the game that there's likely going to be another space race at some point to try to get to those minerals. We just might not be aware of it. It's just going to happen um, because you're like it's not something the average person needs to be aware of. Total market cap hasn't gone up the last couple of weeks. Yeah, we talked about that at the beginning, Bijan. It's good to see you again, buddy. We're talking about at the beginning that despite all the massive moves in the markets, yeah, we've actually just been doing nothing but ranging the last couple of weeks. Like Bitcoin dominance hasn't really shifted. We've just ranged. USDT dominance has just been ranging. Uh, Alt market cap has just been ranging. It just like we're just in a mass accumulation time. Retail is just kind of doing what retail is going to do, and at this point, all we can do is just wait for the market makers to actually make their next big move and see how it plays out. Arrived late, yeah, and it's fine. I don't mind talking about it, but do I agree that Matic could be a top 5 crypto if at gas fees don't improve? ETH is not really all that expensive right now, though. Let's see what's going on. This is if ever you do Bitcoin and ETH transactions, this is what I use to track my stuff. It is like the greatest site of all time. So all you do is like basically it is showing all the pending transactions. And so like you could go like, hey, I'm depositing or withdrawing Bitcoin, and you can like put in your transaction number and it will actually create a little dude for you, and you'll actually see them get on a bus when they're actually in the memory pool for the next block to be passed, and you can kind of see where your position is, what the average prices is to get through, and all that sort of stuff. Okay, so ETH is actually a little bit more expensive right now. It's actually up to about $2 on average. That's actually higher than I've seen it be for a while, but that might be short lived. It just, it fluctuates quite a bit. $2 a transaction is not the worst in the world. Um, Now, as far as Matic being a contender, I think I mentioned something on, I don't know if it was on the WhatsApp or on the Discord, but there was something about Matic I was talking about a few days ago, which I think it was had something to do with tokenization of assets. Um, I'm going off of sleep deprived memory here, so bear with me. I'll pull it up and I'll put it on the Discord after this call. But I believe um the first attempts at tokenizing some real life assets happened on Matic a couple months ago, and I had absolutely no idea. So I'd been looking at Matic because tokenization is going to be the next key thing, and if that's the platform that's getting decided upon, then yeah, Matic could be huge. Whether or not it replaces ETH, I don't know about that. I think ETH has a place in all of our hearts for a long time. It's a name brand at this point, and $2 a transaction is not that horrible. It's more expensive to do stuff on BSC than it is on ETH, or even like Ajax and stuff, or Ajax, AVAX. But yeah, I would definitely put some money when I see a good purchase opportunity. I could see it as a long term hold. I would definitely be willing to put some skin in the game for that. I would highly recommend maybe asking your resident coin researcher for RT to maybe do an analysis of Matic over the next week or two. Since I know he's been kind of hurting for potential coins to research and stuff like that.
I mean, yeah, you're right. I've actually got 3 weeks worth, and then I'm going to run through the top 20. So Polygon will be on the list, but I don't mind knocking it up a notch, since I'm sure there's going to be some interest now.
Bull runs skyrocket on ETH. I'm not entirely sure about that. What really pushed ETH for the longest time was the NFT market, and it was just absolutely ridiculous. And we've also moved away from proof of work to proof of stake, so we might actually see these prices stabilize because now it's no longer reliant on mining and stuff like that. So I don't know. Like, I mean, we could be talking about this in a year or two when the bull market hits, and we would see whether or not ETH is actually going back up to $40 or $50 a transaction. But I don't think it's going to happen. I think, well, right now people don't give a shit about NFTs as much as they used to, and a lot of the NFTs that are coming out are not running on the ETH network. So I don't think we're going to see the same issues that we did before. But even if we do, I don't know if Matic is going to be the replacement. Like, we've had so many networks that have said they were going to be the ETH killer, right? Rumors about price manipulation on Matic. Well, there's like price manipulation on every crypto. It's hard to find one where you can't point out manipulation. But yeah, I mean, it is definitely like it and Dot, as well as possibly Glimmer. I'm kind of looking at as well. Like I'm not really going ham. Like, I'm not super bullish on any of these. But honestly, it's because I've tried to get away from that. When I'm looking at my long-term investing now, I'm looking more at what's going to still be around and what actually has a proper use case. I don't care if it's Matic or if it's HBAR or if it's FTM that does well. I just want to make sure that they're going to be around for the next bull market, because no matter which coins I pick, if they survive the bear market and the retail still cares about them, they're going to make me money. I don't have to get the best of the best. I don't have to find the Uber the of the crypto market to do really well in the next bull run. But yeah, Matic is definitely something I'm watching. Okay, so are there any other questions or any other thoughts before we wrap it up for today? Because we've been at this for almost an hour and a half now. but I will find what I had posted the other day about what was going on with Matic and the tokenizations. I'll find that information. And if I didn't put it on the Discord, I'll post it there. All right. I think this is a good time to call it then. Thanks everyone for hanging out with us today. Next week, we're going to run this at a later time. I'll talk with you on the Discord about it, see if we can find a time that works for everyone. But I'm looking at being either in the afternoon or the evening for the UK, because the need to do this early in the day, it hasn't been necessary. So I think a little bit later in the day would work better for everyone. But I'll keep you posted on timing and stuff like that too. Beyond that, thanks so much for a great day today, guys. Great talk. And,
Thank you, Craig. Really informative. Cheers.
Yeah, thanks. Much appreciated. Speak to you soon.
Yep. Bye, guys.
Right.